hopefully everybody is visually seeing my screen here and able to hear me. I'm going to assume that's okay unless I see a chat. And I'm just going to flip my screen now to a scheduler. So you all should be looking at a scheduler on your screen. Perfect. Okay. So as I mentioned, we're going to go through some reports today in different intervals. I'm going to suggest good timing on when to run those reports. But again, whatever works best at your clinic, you could be specifically looking for information every single day, and I might suggest run the report once a week. So whatever actually works best for you at your clinic is what you want to abide by, of course. And I'm going to show you maybe some little advanced features that you might not be aware of. So if you do have any questions, for those of you who just joined me, if anybody does have any questions along the way, feel free to chat in the chat box on your screen, and I'll see that, and I'll address those as I go. I will also open it up for questions at the end, and feel free to unmute yourself and ask me a question along the way as well if you prefer to do that. Okay, let's get started. So the reports that I tend to show you, I'm going to kind of walk you through this as if I was doing a training session with somebody just learning the software and wondering what reports kind of do what. So the reports, I kind of break them down into what I call daily suggested reports, weekly, monthly, and then on demand. And on demand basically means I can run the report anytime I want, and it's something specifically likely that I'm looking for. And then sometimes those things have very specific requirements for you. So I'm going to take you, I'm just going to mute here. Just to remind everybody, just put yourself on mute if you can, just so there's no background noise in the background if you don't mind. And then, of course, feel free to unmute yourself if you want to talk to me. So on the left-hand side of the screen, the operations drop-down bar, I just wanted to point out that almost everywhere in the system, when you go to a list of a specific item, so right now I'm looking at physicians, or I could be looking at reminders, or I could be looking at payers. If you flag multiple items, and you can do that using your functions to flag or unflag or flag certain things. But when you flag a bunch of different things on the screen and you go to the printer icon, you usually have an option at the bottom left to export that list. So you can actually run a list of all your fee codes, run a list of all your payers, run a list of all your physicians, and you can actually export that as well to an Excel spreadsheet. And that little export button, it's not on every single report that you can do in the system, but it is on quite a few of them. Almost every report that I can think of. But when you do a preview, the system will show you those items that you can export. So this would be like a list of all of my payers with their addresses and phone numbers, and I could either have a look at that list or I could export it to Excel and then sort it from there. Okay, and that works on pretty much everything on the left-hand side. So those are called an on-demand list when you're looking for something specific. You can actually do that with your client listing as well. You can flag a bunch of patients in here and then go to the printer icon. You can also run a report for your patients under the marketing section, and that's called your client listing report. And that report has a ton of different filters. So just kind of be aware of what you're looking for. Every time you filter, of course, you're going to get a different result. But this report would give a list of all of your patients that meet this criteria. So all of my patients between this date range, show me gender analysis, show me zip code, that kind of thing. And if you have multiple locations, most of our reports can be run for a combination of all your locations at the same time, or you can pick out one of those locations and then do a preview from there. Now, this is a client listing report. Most people do know about that report, but I'm not sure that a lot of people are aware of the profile that you can actually print off. So when you're on a specific patient, I'm just going to pick on Mr. Tescope here, and I'm going to double click. So I'm actually in their profile right now. If you hit the printer icon from that area, you can actually print out a listing or all of their details within their profile. You can actually include a client signature line for that as well. So that kind of looks like that. It just prints out their profile with all their details. sometimes what clinics do, if you still have a paper chart, or if you want to have the patient review all this information and sign off on it, so to speak, you would either print this out or give this to them, and then they would sign. Okay, so that's kind of an add-on or an ad hoc option. Okay, now while we're in the profile, there's another report that you can run regarding tasks that are not completed on a file. So this is another one of those little things that's probably a little bit hidden. So I'm not sure if everybody is aware that we have a task area on every file, but I'm in this patient's profile right now and going through all the tabs across to the incident. Each incident that a patient has this little tab in blue called tasks. And it's like a standard list of items that you would say every file has to abide by. It's almost like an audit listing for every single file. So to get this task list to appear on every single patient, it's actually done through housekeeping. There's an area at the bottom called tasks, and then again, tasks. And you basically create that list. So it's kind of like a standard list of things that every file has to go through. You need a copy of this, you need the patient to sign that, you need to have sent a referral letter, that kind of thing. And once you have that list completed in housekeeping, then it appears on every patient's profile in their incident called the task tab. And then next to each item, you can comment, you can state whether that item was complete or whether it's applicable for this patient or not. And then there's a report that you can run under the task and clinical section, and it's called a task status report. And that report, for a specific date range, you can say, show me all the tasks that are actually completed during that range, or show me all the incomplete tasks. And you can do that by division. You can do that by a specific task itself. And that will give you a list. In my example, I'm asking for a list of all of my active patients that still have items on their task list that are not yet complete. And then this is what it would give you. Okay, so that's a handy little thing if you're doing like a little audit trail. Okay, now since we're in the patient profile, since we're looking at a tab in here, there's also logs that you can enter for patients and then run reports on those logs as well. So every patient has this little phone icon that follows them around. And that little phone icon is available anywhere. You don't actually have to be in the profile. You can be on the scheduler, actually. You can be on the client listing. Just look for the little phone. And that is a list of logs that you can enter against a patient. And in housekeeping, tasks as your category, contact log categories. You can actually create your own categories for the logs. So some people have logs they enter and it's about attendance. They have logs they enter, it's about collection issues. They have logs they enter, it's about clinical phone calls to physicians or something. So you can create your own categories. And when you're creating a log on a patient, if you hit the green plus sign, the first thing you choose is that category. So that when you're running a report, you can ask for just the logs for that specific category if you need to. So an example might be something like, I'm a physician, I'm a clinician, and I am, phoning, I'm going to record an issue that this patient has for attendance. They've canceled yet again. So I'm going to record a little message, and I'm going to say maybe that my username and password is the only one that's responsible. If I don't put a name, it means it's kind of open for everybody to pick up. A follow-up date is kind of like a due date. Something has to be completed by this date. And you can even tell the system to create a reminder that pops up on your screen, a yellow sticky note that'll pop up against your username and password on that date regarding this patient. I will say that's more of a love or hate situation. If you're going to have 50 things coming due at the end of September, you'll get 50 individual little pop-ups on your screen. So just keep that in mind. If you don't want that little reminder to actually pop up on your screen, I'm going to say, okay, then what you can do is run a report. You can run a report at an interval of time when you're ready for this. Every Monday, I want to run a report of all the things that I have to do attendance-wise. So that particular report comes from the report drop-down section up here. And that report is your task and clinical report. Okay. Can you guys, I'm just having a little audio issue on my end. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay, good. I'm just getting someone on the phone there that has to dial in. Sorry about that. Okay, so that's a task and clinical report, and that's a contact log follow-up report. And the first thing that you usually filter is your date range. Maybe I don't want to see everything that's due in the past 10 years, but I want to see everything that's coming due by the end of September. And maybe I don't care about all the categories of logs that have been entered. I specifically just want to see my list of attendance logs, and maybe not for all the users, just my users. So you can start to filter these things out a little bit before you run this report. And then the report would show you a list of all the people that you need to do something, that have a follow-up date that meets that criteria with all your little notes. Okay, so that particular report, there's a little reminder for you on the screen. That particular report is called your contact log follow-up report, and it looks like a little phone. And while I'm talking about that contact log, I'm going to scoot to the scheduler because I just want to show you there's a feature that when you're canceling or no-showing or rebooking an appointment on the screen, the system will ask you if you would like to record a cancel or a no-show reason. And you can manually write that, or you can choose from a drop-down list. You can control and create that drop-down list in housekeeping. And at the bottom left-hand side, you can actually ask the system to add that little message to their contact log automatically without having to go there manually. Okay. And what you can do from there is you can actually run a bunch of reports right from the scheduler. So this little icon here that looks like a tiny little calendar, it looks like a scheduler, and it has a little magnifying glass on it. That little report can actually be used for quite a few interesting little things. It's called, when you hover over top, it's called your Find Appointments. I'll just show you that again. That little icon there that looks like a calendar. Find Appointments. And some of the interesting things that you can do in here is you can ask for a list of all the people who have canceled in a certain amount of time. So to do that, you would just choose your location at the top. Instead of a specific client that you're searching for, you would just go all the way to the top and choose all clients or any client. And then your status would be something like canceled within this time frame. And then you would enter a date range in there. And if you do a search, the system will find everything that meets that criteria. So this right now is a list of all my patients who have canceled at this location between the last month. And if I were to print or preview that, I can see all the reasons that people have been canceling. All my comments are on there. And then that's a list of people with a counter at the bottom. So the report summarizes at the bottom how many people have actually canceled, how many unique patients, if the same patient has canceled more than once on that list, divisions. It gives you a nice little summary at the bottom. Okay. Now this report, like I said, you can run a ton of different results, just changing your criteria. So maybe you're interested in knowing how many purple appointments you've booked in the month of whatever. So you would start at the top, choose your location. You would probably choose any type of client, any status, unless you're looking for just specifically the people who have canceled or no-showed or showed up for their appointment. And then the next filter would be the color. I'm only looking for purple appointments. And then through this date range, and then you would enter a search. And then the system will show you all the appointments that meet that criteria. So lots of cool little results that you can actually get from that report. Okay, and that little icon looks like a calendar with a little magnifying glass. It's officially called your Find Appointment search. Okay, while we're on a specific patient here, I'll also show you this little icon because some people don't know that it's there. It looks like a little bar graph. I'm just going to highlight that and point on that just to point that little guy out. So that little icon there is called your Client Account Summary. So when you hover over that, it'll say Client Account Summary. Whoops, sorry, too fast. And what that'll do is it'll give you a little bit of stats on that patient. So you can look at your stats. If you look at the top right, you can look at your stats incident by incident, or you can combine all the incidents together by choosing all incidents. But it's a cool little counter. It's keeping track on the left of a little bit of account summary, how much was billed to the client versus insurance as a total, the aging. On the right-hand side, it's keeping some stats about how many future appointments they have, how many they've attended so far, how many cancels and no-shows. So it's a nice little screen to get to. And you can get there directly from the scheduler. So just be on the patient appointment, up to the function bar, and choose Client Account Summary. Okay. And this patient has 2 incidents, so just show you the difference. I'm going to click on the arm issue first, and you should see that my numbers are different now that I click on the second claim. Okay, so you can do it incident by incident, or you can do it combined. Okay. Okay, so good timing. My little reminder has popped up for us on the screen. So this little reminder is what we just talked about in the contact log. If I ask the reminders to actually pop up on my screen, it looks like a little yellow sticky note. And why this is a love-hate relationship is because you get an individual sticky note per contact log that you've asked for. And you have to deal with the situation. So I'll just kind of highlight this here. You actually have to answer the questions on the right. Don't tell me about this again. Have it go away, have it disappear. I don't ever need to see it again. Remind me again later, I believe, is an automatic 15-minute pop-up later. Or you can choose specifically as the third option, just tell me about this again in a certain amount of time. Okay, but you do have to choose one of those. Okay. Now, manually, you can enter your own reminders in the system as well instead of a contact log. So on the left-hand side of the screen where we started today under operations, there is a little reminders area there. Green plus sign is how you add a new reminder. And there's 2 types of reminders here that the tabs kind of explain. There's a general reminder, meaning it's not really specific per se. It's probably a one-time reminder that you want to pop up on this date at this time for the specific users below. So you could say, have it pop up for everybody, or just have it pop up for these 5 people. So that's kind of a one-time. The advanced function is kind of like a repeating reminder, just like you have a repeating or recurring appointment. You can tell the system, this particular reminder repeats itself. Every 3rd Monday of the month, I need this to pop up. So it's kind of like a recurring situation. Okay. And then if you had a bunch of reminders in here, you can run reports on that as well. If you flag them in this area, hit the printer icon, tell the system what date range you're looking for, it'll give you a list of all your reminders. Okay. So those are some of the kind of, I'd say, hidden features behind the scenes that some people just don't know that are there sometimes. So I'd like to start with that. But realistically, a lot of the reports that you run from the system, a lot of them are financial in nature, and a lot of them are trying to help you balance your day and make sure that we haven't really forgotten anything in the system. So at the top of the screen under reports, that is kind of how they've sectioned out the reports. So financial, we're going to go through some of those. Those are your bigger type financial type reports. Operations is more of your daily and weekly reports, showing you summaries of all things happening at the office. Marketing, finding out where your referrals are coming from, what types of patients we're treating, and then the scheduler reports as well is usually pertaining to the scheduler. So we're going to talk about those 4 different categories, and we're going to talk about some of the very common, very popular reports that we tend to run in the system. So let's actually start with the scheduling report. There are situations potentially where your therapist might not have access to the scheduler, or you need to print off a list of all the appointments or something for that particular therapist, or have a look, visually on a piece of paper. So under the scheduling section, usually most of these have to do with scheduling a patient. They would have to do with something with the patient having an appointment. The most common ones, I would say, tend to be in the middle, called the resource reports. And resource is a provider. So usually a provider, if they want a printout or something of all their appointments, they either usually want a day at a glance or a day sheet. And I'll show you what the difference is. So a day at a glance resource report is for one specific date. You do have lots of options to suppress information or make sure we show this or include this, but basically what that report will show is provider by provider, it'll show exactly all the appointments or the scheduler as is how I should phrase that. So it's going to show all the appointments, plus it's going to show the empty or non-booked time as well. Okay, and I've asked for everything to show up in this report, but it's got lots of little notes there for me. In fact, it's got most of the notes that would appear at the blue top section when I'm looking at a patient, so all those financial notes. This is handy sometimes when you want a therapist to see a list of all of the scheduled appointments with all the limitations for coverage, all on a sheet. Okay, so that particular one is called a resource day at a glance. It's kind of like glancing your calendar, and everything that's on there will be on that report, even the empty stuff. Okay. The next report, very similar to that under the scheduling section, is called a resource day sheet. And a day sheet, again, for one date range, and you still have tons of little options to show this, show that, don't include this, per location or all locations combined. And that preview is more like a list. It excludes all the non-booked time and then just shows the therapist a list of what is scheduled with the times. It does actually show the notes as well. It shows things, as you can see, like future scheduled appointments, financial notes, how much coverage is left, and those are options before you run that report too. Okay, so those come from your scheduling section. So in the scheduling section, some other common reports I would say that are in here as well. Your client attendance report is somewhat popular. So that report is, first of all, asking for a date range, and you can ask the system to show clients attendance-wise, show clients with either a last date of appointment within that range, or their first initial appointment was in that date range, or they have any visit at all within that date range. And so this report is kind of like a stats report. And that would give you a list of patients that meet that criteria, and it's giving you some stats. How many appointments have they had to date? How many future appointments do they have? When was their last appointment? That kind of thing. You could change the parameters of that report and ask for just people with future scheduled appointments if you wanted to. You could change the filter and say, include discharge patients in that search as well. Okay, so lots of different filters, and that one's called your patient or client attendance report. So all those ones tend to come from your scheduling section. And really, I would say, feel free to run any report in the system. There's really nothing that happens when you run a report. You're just looking at a static piece of data. It's not moving numbers into another column or anything. So anything in the report section, really, you're free to just kind of move around and play with dates in there and see what you're looking for. But those, I would say, are probably the most common ones out of the scheduling area. Okay, so I'm going to move up to operations now because I really want to get into some of the reports that are going to help balance or point out maybe things that are missing in the day-to-day routine. So if we kind of, talk about the flow of how things happen at the clinic, right? We have a patient who has booked an appointment. They hopefully show up for that appointment. We treat them, we document on that treatment, we record or hopefully charge for services rendered at that treatment, and we might even take some money and give some receipts at that point. We want to make sure that all those things are kind of balanced at the end of the day. So I'm going to pick on September the 9th here in my scheduler just to visually point out a few things. So the first thing we would say is have a look at your calendar and see if you can figure out if anything's missing right at your calendar before running any reports. So in theory, all your patients should look somewhat like that, right? If the patient showed up, the status symbol on the right, they should have a bag full of money and a perfect bill if they paid, and they should have a hand symbol indicating that we've charged for some kind of service. The only time it might be okay for us not to really have a charge is maybe if somebody is canceled or no-showed or rescheduled and we just don't have a fee for that. That makes sense. We wouldn't see a little hand there. Okay, so right away on my screen, of course, there's tons of things that don't look like the story is complete. I don't know if this person even showed up, therefore I don't really know if I'm supposed to charge them or take the money. But if visually after looking at the calendar, you're ready to start running some reports, the 2 reports that we would say that you should run every day, and I would say run them every week, run them every month, run them every year, run them whenever you want, but also run them every day. The 2 major reports that we would say are under the reporting section under operations. And the first one is your daily reconciliation. And then the second one is going to be your revenue report. So let's have a look at those real quick. The daily reconciliation report, you can run for a specific date range. So although I keep saying daily, 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 run it every day, you can run it for whatever range of time you feel like running it for. Okay. Now, most of your operational reports, your referral reports, even your revenue reports, usually have 3 options if we're talking about patient or new patients within the system. So if you want this report to show you your list of new patients or new referrals, there's 3 dates that you can run that by: referral date, contact date, or assessment date. And keep in mind, each choice is going to probably give you a different number on your report, a different result. So really quickly, before I even run that report, I just want to show you where those dates actually come from. So I'm on my fake green appointment here, my Mr. Private Patient. I'm just going to hit the Enter button to go into his profile, and I'm going to go to the Incidents tab. 2 of my dates, I lied, 1 of my date actually comes from this incident tab, and that is the referral date. And it's not a required field per se in the system, but most people choose a referral source and then they assign a referral date. And that's subjective. That could mean the date they actually called the clinic, the date they were referred to the clinic, the date you started them, the date you entered them. You kind of have to decide what that date means to you at the clinic and then be consistent. But that field itself is one of the options when you're running a report. If your clinic is not filling out that field, you probably don't want to run your reports in that way by that particular filter. Okay. The other 2 dates actually come from the Statistics tab of a client's incident. And the first option here is contact date, and then the next one is assessment date. So assessment date is a manual entry. You do have to choose an entry date for that field. So again, if your clinic isn't really recording that type of field consistently, you may decide that's not the date that I really want to run the report by. The contact date, although you can pick and choose a date there, it's actually an automated field. The system knows when your fingers touch the keyboard and enter this incident for this patient, and it records that date automatically in the system. So I would say that's probably the most used search in most of your reports is the contact date because it's fed by the system. Okay, so just keep that in mind when you're running reports. So that particular report I was on was under Reports, Operations, and then your Daily Reconciliation Report. And I'm running this report, of course, by contact date. Okay, lots of different filters. You can include products, you can include predictive rates. I just kind of leave it with the standard selections and do a preview. So this report, your daily reconciliation report, actually has about 5 different reports all summarizing into one. And that's why it's a very common, very popular report. So the first section here is your revenue summary. That's going to be the same as your revenue report, but it's a summary version. It's not really showing me a whole lot of detail, but it's summarizing things like all my individual fee codes down the left. It's counting them. It's saying, hey, you did 10 of those, 4 of those, 2 of those, 3 of those. Okay, it is giving me a percentage of my revenue on the right-hand side with an actual number of how much I've entered for charges. Okay, so that particular reading has a summary of units and visits and items. My next summary has to do with my scheduler. It's looking at all the therapists that I have available in my scheduler, and it's also giving me some stats for each of those therapists appointment-wise. It's saying, hey, Heather, you had 10 cancels, 4 no-shows, 3 attends. The number of people attending should probably equal the same number of visits that I've charged for. That's usually my first point of balance, right? If I have 7 people arriving and completing their appointments, I probably need 7 charges, 7 visits, okay? On the right-hand side, if I have any pending appointments during that time, that's usually a red flag. If I've run my report for yesterday or for a period of time that's already over, I probably don't want to see too many pending status, right? The status that means I don't know if the patient showed up or not. Because by now we would probably have to know if they're a cancel or a no-show or they showed up. Okay. As I kind of move down on my report, my payment summary is next, and that's going to equal another report soon that we're going to look at called the payment journal, but this is more of a summary. It's summarizing all my payment methods, my cash, Visa, MasterCard, American Express. It's recording how much of that came in from a client as opposed to a payer, and then giving me a total on the right. So the total is really what you're trying to balance against, right? If your Visa MasterCard machine says you have $100 in Amex and this says $50, we probably know we're out. We probably have to look a little harder on a payment journal and try to figure out where that difference is. The next part of the summary is called activity summary. And this part here would record all new patients that have been entered in the system. And remember, I can run a new patient based on a referral date, contact date, or assessment date. And if a patient does show up in that area, we should see that they're in a division, and we probably should see that they have a reason for referral, that we're keeping track of where all the referrals are coming from. Okay. The next part of the report is really why everybody runs this report so often. This is the section that's going to tell you if it thinks something is a little off or it thinks something is missing. And that's called your billing reconciliation section. So the first part of billing reconciliation is not that bad. This message is saying the following patients attended their appointments, but they had a balance that they didn't pay. That's just the reality of the way things go. If you see a higher balance, maybe that would be a little bit of a red flag. So, but that's a list of patients who did show up for their appointment that didn't pay their balance. Okay. The next part of the report is really why everybody's looking at this report so often, and that's the section saying, I think we missed something. So it says the following patients may be missing charges today. So it's going to list the patient's name down the left. On the right, it'll have the date of the appointment, the name of the provider, and what incident they were scheduled under. If their name appears in this list with nothing in the visit column, it usually means we have missed them completely. There doesn't seem to be a little white hand or a charge for any kind of visit for that patient on that day with that therapist. If their name shows up on this report with a little star next to their name, that usually means we did charge them. We did use the little white hand to charge them on that day, but whatever it is that we've charged them isn't a visit, which means we might have sold them something. We might have entered a report or a cost for something, but it doesn't seem to be a visit. So the system is saying, just double check that, see what that charge is on that patient, and see if it's correct. Are we actually missing the visit? Did we charge a copay and not the treatment or something? Okay, so that's a really good report to run, and I would suggest run it again at least every day and run it again at the end of the month and make sure that we haven't missed anything for that whole month. Okay, so that's under Reports, Operations, Daily Reconciliation. The next report that we suggest you run right after that daily rec is the revenue report. So the revenue report now is just a list of all the little white hands, all the charges. That's its only function. That's what revenue is in our system, generated revenue. And if you're a biller, there are tons of filters. If you look at this, every drop down will give you a different number. So if you're a biller checking this before you're ready to bill things, I include this little box. I'm just going to highlight it here. That's called Show Injury Related Information as well. There are lots of different payers out there that require things like diagnostic codes and modifiers and special entries. So if you're getting ready to bill this, you need to look for that kind of stuff usually. Another thing sometimes that we do is on a provider, we say show the results individually. And what that means is if I have 5 providers that I've been entering charges for all day, I want each of them to be separated and have their own sheet of paper. So therapist A will get its results, therapist B will get its results, and then therapist C. And I don't have to run those individually by therapist A, then run it again for B, then run it again for C. I can just tick that box and it does it for me. Okay, so be aware, lots of different filters. You're going to get a different result if you filter out something. So that should show you a very detailed report of exactly what was entered and how it was entered. So sometimes the division is really going to help you. So in my example here, this is a division of cash pay. I probably would not want to see my patient getting some kind of motor vehicle fee or a workers' comp fee or some kind of fee that a private cash patient wouldn't receive. I'm checking if I have to record things like units and time. Does my unit and time match that particular code? Do I need to adjust it? Is my price on the right correct? Have I entered the same code on the same day for the same patient twice? So you're just kind of reviewing these things to see if you can catch something that's missing and then go back and fix it on your patient. This is kind of like the first check that you would do before you actually start your billing. Let's see what was entered. Some of our clinics, it's the therapist that enters all of these things. So you always have to double check what's been entered and try to fix items. Okay. Now this is a great report to run every week, every month as well. And you can ask for just a summary. If you don't want to look at all the detail that you've been looking at, you've already done that every single day, you can say, show me the results as a summary. And it just filters out, instead of giving you 15 pages, you get it all into one. Okay. Back under reports. Now my third report that I'm going to show you is actually in a different section. It's in the financial section, and it's called your payment journal. And that's another good report that I do suggest you run every day. You're going to see, you probably want to run it every week, every month, every whatever, but every day the payment journal is an excellent report to keep an eye on as well. So the payment journal, for whatever period of time you decide to enter here, I'm not going to filter anything, but there's tons of options. This report shows me just the payments that have been entered. It even shows me the username and person that entered those. But it shows on the left-hand side the patient, what method of payment that was used, and then it gives me some nice little summaries down here as well. How much of it was Amex versus cash. So this section here that I'm circling, that's the same little section that shows up on your daily reconciliation report. But sometimes you run this report because you want the detail. If something's off, you're going to need the detail. Okay. So those 3 reports, I would say, are a must-do every single day, and run them for whatever other range as well. But I would say those 3 will really keep you on track. Now, back under the operations section, there are a few other reports that are pretty popular in here. So the compensation report. For those of you not familiar with how the system calculates compensation, it's actually set up initially through housekeeping, financial, and fee codes. That's where your individual charges for services are going to be set up, right? How much you charge for a massage, how much you charge for a physio. Then under housekeeping, contact provider is where you set up each individual provider's compensation. And you do that by double clicking on their name, and they all have a compensation tab in the background. And then on the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see those are all of your fee codes. Those are all of the charges, all of the services that you have listed in housekeeping. So if you plan on compensating your therapist based on the services that they render, then you would set it up in this way. So you would choose a fee code, go to the right-hand side, and decide how you're going to pay the therapist or compensate the therapist based on that code. Is it an hourly rate based on how long they provide that code to a patient? Is it per visit? Is it a percentage? Is it a fixed rate? And then likely on the right-hand side, you'll have an expense ledger. You'll make up a ledger called staff payroll or compensation or something like that. Okay, so the system will follow you. So as you start charging patients, if I use this code 0518F, every time I use it against this therapist, it's going to calculate a compensation in my example of $30 an hour, or in this code, it's $70 a unit. Okay, so it basically records things and the revenue report, but the compensation report then is the revenue report plus a calculation for compensation. So the compensation report is run usually for a period of time, usually your payroll time. And remember those little filters that can change your results, right? We have a show everything taking place this period. That means as long as the date of service is happening during this date range, I want it on this report. Show everything entered means it doesn't matter what the date of service is, it's when my fingers touch the keyboard. Did I enter the services during this date range, regardless of what I might have future dated or backdated? And then the other option is don't base it based on services rendered, only show me stuff that's been paid during this period of time. It just depends on how you compensate. Okay, and then this report will show you, I don't have much on here, but it shows you all the services that were rendered on the left and entered, how much you charged, and then the compensation rate for that therapist has been calculated. Okay, so that's your compensation report. And that report is found under your operations section. Another very popular report is the funding report. Who is running out of funding? So that particular report, you could run for a specific payer. You're interested to know how many of your Medicaid clients have less than 10 services left for coverage. So you would filter. You would filter by payer, and you would probably filter above, show me everybody that's got less than whatever number of coverage. Okay, you can run that by location, combine locations as well, and it will give you a list of everybody that's running out of coverage that meets that criteria. So it helps you kind of keep an eye on certain divisions of patients or even payers. Okay. Another very popular report in here is called the operations summary. Now this report, although it's under the operations section, operations summary, I would say, is better run for a bigger period of time. Your stats will be a little bit skewed if you only run it for a day. So an example on this report would be something like, if I only run the report for today and I have 2 cancels on my scheduler, it might look like I have 30% cancellation rate, but that's just based on my 1 day. So these reports I find are better run for the month sometimes, so a bigger range of time. Remember those filters, show me patients based on a referral date, contact date, or assessment date, all locations, 1 location. And that report looks very similar to your daily report. When it shows up, it's just giving you a little bit more detail from a management perspective. So it's showing you your revenue summary here, just like the daily report did, but it's giving you a little bit more stats on the right-hand side for percentages. Same with your provider attendance summary here, looking at the scheduler for every therapist, counting appointments. Hey, Heather, you had 2 cancels, 4 no-shows, whatever. It's also giving you things like an average per visit, an average revenue per visit, and a percentage of no-shows and cancellations. Okay. For the payment journal, it's still showing you the same numbers as the daily report, just more information. It's giving you an aging summary for that as well. For your new patients or patient activity, meaning not only showing you how many are new, but how many we've discharged as well, what the move patient numbers are. It's also showing you where the patients are connected to. How many are Medicare, how many are motor vehicle by division. And then the bottom of this report also shows you an unbilled section based on a division. And unbilled services, we'll actually look at that next. Unbilled services means show me all the services that have not yet been invoiced. Okay. So that's called your operations summary. So I do see a question on the side, how do you kind of show unbooked time? So unbooked time, there's lots of different stats that we keep based on a provider and based on how much time they have available in the schedule versus how much was booked and how much was billed for. So this particular report under operations that I'm going to show you next is called the Provider Performance Summary. And the Provider Performance Summary, again, is probably run better, I would say, for a month of time, a larger period of time. And I'm going to filter this out and run this for my pretend clinic here. And this kind of compares providers against, it's bad wording to say against one another, but it shows them as a column at the top. And it's keeping track, all those little things you see on the left-hand side are individual statistics. So it's keeping track of how many scheduled hours they had versus how many scheduled visits, how many unscheduled hours. What's their percentage of cancels and no-shows? What's their average revenue per unit per visit? Okay. So that's the Provider Performance Summary. Okay. Now I'm going to go up to the financial section next because I see that we've only got a little bit of time left, and I just want to make sure you know some of these reports are in here. So under the financial section, these reports, some of these are really good to run every day, so don't get me wrong, but these kind of reports I like to run weekly, monthly, kind of when I need them. Accounts receivable by invoice. That report is as of a certain date. So usually you run this report saying, as of right now for this location or all my locations, show me what has been billed but not yet paid. That's what accounts receivable by invoice will show you. So all the invoices out there that have not been paid. You'll see that most of my clients have these big yellow sections. Those are all my notes that I've been keeping track of on the client. Those are my contact logs, in fact, that I've been recording as a category called collections. So if I choose not to want those to show up on my notes, I just change my contact log category here to none, or don't include this, or just include the stuff that has to do with collections. Okay, that report can be run a ton of different ways. Don't show me everything, just show me the stuff that's 60 days or over. Don't show me everything, just show me the stuff that's 90 days or over for Medicare. So you can filter those reports. But that report in general is going to show you all the things you have invoiced that have not yet been paid. Okay. The general ledger report here, a lot of accountants will want this report. This report, again, is run usually for a larger range of time. And your big difference here is the show taking place this period, meaning base this on the date of service or the date of payment, not the date I entered it, or base it on the date that I entered it. Most accountants run things by the date entered because they want to capture things that have been backdated or forward dated. Okay. So that report is just a list of your general ledgers coming from housekeeping. It's tracking all the numbers that are debiting and crediting. So in a financial world, your debits always equal your credits, right? Your balance sheet. So this is telling you accounts receivable, that's all your invoices out there that have not yet been paid. So as things get paid, they move between debits and credits. The balance on the right-hand side are the numbers that you would normally feed into something like Simply Accounting, QuickBooks, something like that. Okay, so that's a really good report that usually accountants want. And that one is under Financial General Ledger. We have a new report at the end here called an Invoice Summary. And this report has a couple of different date ranges. You can run this based on an invoice date or based on when services were occurred on that invoice. And it's just a list of the invoices basically that were created during that time. Okay. Another good financial report that I always say keep an eye on this one is your unbilled services. That's a list of all the little white hands, all the charges that have not yet been billed. And you want to keep an eye on that whenever your billing cycle is. If you only bill once a month, then you need to look at that once a month. If you're ready to bill on the 15th and the 30th, you probably want to have a look at that on the 15th and the 30th. I always say look at it before you bill and then look at it after you bill. So if I think that I just went through and did all my billing, I would go to the Unbilled Services report, enter my range, my location, any filters, and that should not be a surprise. I should be like, why are all those things still showing up? I thought I just billed everybody. But that's a list of things that are not yet billed. Okay, another word for that would be work in progress. Okay. Now the two reports in here, I've talked about the payment journal, and that's a listing of every payment that's been entered, who entered it, how it was entered, check, Visa, MasterCard, whatever. But there's a more detailed report than that called the payment application report. So an example might be something like a payment journal might show a $100 check was entered today. The application report would say that $100 check went 25 here, 50 here, and 25 here. So the application report for a specific range of time, and then any of the other filters, of course, that you want to enter, it shows you service by service what was entered, not just the check of 100, which the payment journal would show, but all the services that that $100 actually paid or was applied to. Okay. All right, so those are kind of the majority, I would say, of the big types of reports that you can run in the system. There's one last one that I just want to show you because it's kind of hidden, I would say. A lot of people don't know about it. It's called a missing fields report. So we get a lot of questions and reports, requests into support saying, well, how do I know? Give me a list of all the people where I've missed their phone number, or give me a list of all the people I've missed their email address or something. So that particular report is in fact called a missing field report, but how you have to set that up is in the division area. So under housekeeping contact divisions, that's the list of all my divisions here. I'm going to pick on Medicare as an example. When I'm on that division and I flag that division, I have a little icon that looks like kind of like a piece of paper. That's called required fields. And that shows me it matches the tabs, as you can see, that a client profile has, but it gives me the options to say that this is a required field. So I could say something like on my Medicare division patients, it is required that I have first name, last name, home phone number, street address. It is required that I have birth date and gender. It is required that I have this, that, and the other thing. Okay? So that's how you set up the requirement. And then that division would be attached to a patient. And then you can run a report in the system. And that report is called a missing fields report. And it's a relatively new one for me. So of course I can never find it in here half the time. And that report is under the marketing section actually, called Client Missing Field Report. And you basically enter a date range. Show me all the patients within this date range by contact date, referral date, assessment date. Keep in mind you have those three filters. And the system should give me results, hopefully, of all the people that are missing those required fields and what those required fields are. Okay. Okay, guys. So if I haven't addressed some of your questions, let's see if we can actually do that now. And feel free to unmute yourself. We've got about 6 minutes or so. I can stay later, of course, but if some of you have to leave, I completely understand. So feel free to unmute yourself if you have a specific question or something that you want to ask me. But otherwise, I am going to see if I can address some of those questions. So one of the questions that we're asking is the yellow sticky note. And does the yellow sticky note pop up on the remote Practice Perfect? And I believe that means if the web app, if you're using the web app, do you still get the reminders? I believe the answer is yes. I'm not actually 100% sure, but the reminder section should, to my knowledge, work whether you're using the full access version, the remote access version, or even the web version. You should still get the little sticky note. Some things that are very limited in the web version are things like printing. You actually don't have, I'm going to circle for you, you actually don't have this whole section where we can run all the reports that we talked about today. You can't do that on the web version of the software. That's only available on the full desktop version, by the way. Someone is asking on the revenue report, can you choose between billed and unbilled? No, in theory. So the revenue report, but I might be misunderstanding the question. The revenue report is, it's only going to show you, it doesn't care, if you will. It doesn't care whether the services have been billed or unbilled. So the revenue report itself is just meant to show you every single little charge that's been entered. If you wanted to find the billed, you would run the invoice journal or the invoice report, or you would run the unbilled services report. But the revenue report itself just simply records or shows you the little white hands that have been entered, if that helps.
Heather, can you hear me?
Yes, hi.
Hi, I'm Jackie from Aramasa Physio.
Hi.
I have a question. A couple days ago, we got a message from our college in regards to the privacy changes that are upcoming in 2020 for essentially reporting any touch point on a client's chart.
Okay.
And that could be from them being marked attended to, we have a contact log, the SOAP note, like basically we're going to have to run a report should we be requested by the privacy officer to demonstrate that we're tracking that. Historically, we only had to report when asked or when we had a privacy breach, but now they want to see the percentage of touch points by privacy breach. So we're wondering if that's been brought up to Practice Perfect because, we are concerned as to how we're going to track that.
So sorry, they want a list of every touch point based on a patient, like all the different things that you're tracking on a patient. That's what they want?
Yeah, every patient, every provider. So the example would be client comes in, our admin mark them attended. We do a COVID screen that goes in their contact log, then we bill. So that's obviously part of their client file, but then the physio logs on to Practice Perfect. Not all of our physio, like we have some computers that will have like a general Practice Perfect log on that physios may, access, for example, PhysioTech through, that still gets tied to that client's file, but not specifically that physio's username. Because one of our concerns with reading it from our college was that really our physios could only touch point someone's chart if they had logged off and logged on under their own user. Anyway, it just literally was sent by the college 3 days ago, but I can't imagine we're going to be the first people.
Sure. Well, I haven't heard of it in the past 3 days anyways. If it is, it sounds like it's relatively new. So what I would suggest is maybe just send me the information and I can check on it. But it almost sounds like it has to come from the clinic because although the functionality is part of Practice Perfect, the touch point operationally is based on the clinic,
I definitely
right?
think it has to come from the clinic, but I mean, we're hoping that we'd be able to, be able to click on something with Practice Perfect that says, here's a complete list of the touch points of this file.
Right. So that, to my knowledge, it's so new. I don't think there's anything in place, and I haven't even heard of it just yet. I'm assuming it's an Ontario thing.
It is not Ontario. That's fine. I'll send the email to Steve.
Yeah, for sure. If you could send me the details, that'd be awesome, and I'll look into it for you for sure.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. I do have a question I want to address. How do you set up a division? So under housekeeping contacts divisions is where you actually create the individual divisions. And then when you're setting up a patient, when you're in their profile, you would go to the incident tab and you would connect, whoops, there's my reminder, you would connect the patient here to their division. Okay. Another question is asking for the accounts receivable report. Does it show the aging such as 0 to 30, 30 to 60, that kind of stuff? Yes, it automatically does that. So under the financial section of your reports, the accounts receivable by invoice report, I'm just going to run this report. I don't even know if I have any accounts receivable here for my location. I do have a little bit. So you can kind of see it kind of automatically does that for you. It's based on the date of the invoice as well. So it kind of files that for you into 0 to 30, 30 to 60. If you don't want all of the detail that this report has to show you, I believe there's a little tick box. Hopefully you can see my mouse where it says show summary only. And then it just really reduces 50 pages into one, and it just shows you your actual numbers. It's not as detailed showing you all your individual invoice numbers and whatnot, but it's kind of showing you where your numbers are at least. So you can be like, oh my gosh, why do I have so much in 120 day, that kind of thing. Okay. Okay, I do have another question, actually interesting. Under the payer section, when you're looking at payers and you're setting up a payer and you see this kind that's selected here, where do you control that? It's actually one of the checklists you don't control in Practice Perfect. So in the US version, that specifically comes from a clearinghouse requirement and or your HCFA claim forms. In Ontario or Canada, in fact, you're going to see one of 4 options. You're going to see auto, work-related, extended healthcare, and other. So it has to do with the way things are transmitted in a certain way. It has to say auto as an example before it goes to HCI. So it's not something that you actually can control, if you're wondering. Sorry about that. Hopefully I have addressed everybody's questions on here. Thanks so much for attending. This is kind of the first series of webinars that we've actually done just on reports. And it's so much to show you. So I feel like I did kind of move around quite quickly there. So hopefully you guys did get something useful out of this session. I do have all of your email addresses, I believe. So Michelle is going to be sending you a sample of the reports with a little description of what all the reports do. There are a few more options that are coming out, just so you know, in the next release. I showed you today version 553. And that was released about a month and a half ago, I believe. They're already in version 558, and I think there's another version coming out within the next 2 weeks or so. So just keep an eye on the notes for the releases, because it tells you what fields and what new functions are available, what new reports are even available, or options within the reports as well. Okay. Okay, guys. So if there's no other questions, you're all free to go. Thanks so much for attending. And this session is recorded. Yes, this session is recorded. You can watch it again, listen to it again, share it with all your friends, anyone. You can pass it on to anyone you like. It should be uploaded in about a week or so. So I'm actually going to show you where that will be. So when you go to the Help menu in Practice Perfect and go to the About section, and from there choose the link for the Learning Center. Hopefully you've all made it this far to the Learning Center. This is where all of our videos are stored. And this particular section is kind of down on the right-hand side. It's called our webinar section. And we upload all of our webinars that are recorded into this section. They're usually called Continuing Education with Heather. So you usually find them in the bottom section of there, but that is where they will be. And they take about a week or so to get converted and uploaded, but you should see it there shortly for sure. Okay. Okay, guys. Well, thanks again so much for attending. We'll talk to you soon. And for those of you on the GoToMeeting, you're going to see that